In the beginning of the movie, a group of prisoners is shown working in a large area, breaking stones. They were brought from the jail and chained together in groups of 3 to prevent escape. While working, they sang folk songs to avoid boredom. A long-shot scene revealed them working near a cornfield. Meanwhile, 3 prisoners were seen running away from the cornfield. These 3 were also chained together, so they could only escape as a group. After much effort, they managed to get out of the cornfield. Their leader, Everett, guided them during the escape. Everett had been sent to jail for robbing a bank. Using the stolen money, he had bought gold and hidden it in a part of his house. However, a dam was being built near his house, and the area would soon be flooded. If that happened, the gold would be lost. Everett planned to retrieve the gold before it was too late. He convinced the other 2 prisoners to join him, promising to share the gold. On their way, they entered a farm, caught a rooster, cooked it in the forest, and ate it. While they were eating, they heard the sound of a train passing by. Leaving their food behind, they ran toward the train, knowing they had to catch it somehow. The train wasn't moving very fast, so they decided to try. Everett struggled but managed to jump onto the train. He assumed it would be empty, but to his surprise, there were 4 or 5 people sitting inside. Feeling worried, he stood still and stayed silent. Delmar, who was behind Everett, also managed to jump onto the train. He was Everett's close friend and had joined the journey to help recover the gold. He successfully climbed aboard. However, the third person, Peter, couldn't keep up with the train's speed. Everett and Delmar worked together to pull him onto the train. Once all 3 were on board, they noticed 2 or 3 other people sitting inside. Seeing them, the group grew uneasy. Meanwhile, the strangers in the train were talking about something among themselves. Peter asked his friends to stop arguing and help pull him up instead. While running, his foot hit something, and he tripped. Since they were all connected by chains, Peter's fall caused both Delmar and Everett to stumble and fall as well. Meanwhile, the train had already moved ahead. Everett questioned Peter, saying he should have jumped up earlier. Peter replied confidently, saying he didn't need advice and declared himself the new team leader. He insisted they listen to him because he had more experience in such situations. He also warned Everett not to assume leadership just because he had the gold. This led to a disagreement between Peter and Everett. Delmar intervened, urging them to stop arguing and focus on finding a way to escape. He reminded them that their priority was survival. At that moment, they noticed a large field on the other side of the railway track. From the field, they could hear the barking of dogs, signaling that the police likely realized their escape and had brought tracking dogs to catch them. Understanding the urgency of the situation, the group realized they had no option but to act quickly to avoid being caught. There was no time for further arguments. At that time, a blind man who worked near the railway tracks was coming along with a small trolley. The group ran toward him and asked for a lift. The man, though blind, agreed and said they could join him since he was traveling alone. While traveling, the blind man started talking to them. He mentioned they were heading toward a great treasure, specifically gold. Hearing this, Everett, Delmar, and Peter felt very excited. Everett asked the blind man if they would truly get the treasure. However, the man calmly replied that nothing would happen as they hoped, and they wouldn't be able to claim the treasure. Disappointed, all 3 fell silent. Meanwhile, it was revealed that Peter could get out of jail after just 1 more week, while Delmar needed to wait for a month. However, they both foolishly got involved in Everett's gold story, which put them in trouble. Realizing they could be caught and jailed for 19 years, Everett tried to reassure the others. He said they shouldn't worry as he was the one carrying the gold, and they could become rich and live comfortably. Later, Peter took the group to an old, isolated house belonging to someone he knew. When they arrived, a young boy stood at the entrance holding a gun. He noticed the 3 men and, suspicious of them, pointed the gun and warned them to leave. Peter quickly intervened and called out to the boy, claiming to be his uncle. Confused, the boy asked when Peter had been released from jail. Peter ignored the question and asked the boy to call his father, saying he needed to speak with him. The group managed to calm the boy down and went inside to meet his father, who appeared distracted and preoccupied with something. The man managed to take them to his house after they escaped. He provided them with food and other necessities to ensure they were comfortable. He also removed the chains from their hands. At night, while everything seemed to be going well, they were engaged in a conversation. During this time, Everett noticed a gel-like substance in the house. Fascinated, he applied it to his head and combed his hair repeatedly. Seeing this, Peter's relative gave him a disapproving look, as if to say, "What is this nonsense?" After a while, the three of them fell asleep. Suddenly, they heard dogs barking outside. Everett quietly looked out and saw the house surrounded by police officers. It was Peter's relative who betrayed them, realizing he could earn a good amount of money by handing over the three escaped prisoners. The police, armed and ready, shouted, "Come out respectfully." Peter looked at his relative and said angrily, "You really tricked us, didn't you?" Despite calling Everett and Delmar, they didn't step out. As a result, the police lit a torch and set fire to the base of the wooden structure they were hiding in. The officers shouted, "Let's see how long you can stay inside. Come out peacefully." The three, now terrified, stood there helpless, not knowing what to do or where to go. At the same time, a policeman threw a fireball inside, expecting the people to quickly smoke out. However, Everett caught the fireball and, saying he didn't need it, threw it back outside. Though it wasn't part of any big plan, something exciting happened. The place was a farm, and when the fireball was thrown back, it landed in a spot full of dry grass, which caught fire quickly. The fire spread, reaching a small van where the policeman had taken cover. The van caught fire and began to explode. During this, an automatic machine gun started firing on its own. The jailer, running and lifting his robe, shouted that he didn't know the way out. The police scattered in all directions without realizing what was happening in such a short time. Then, an old, broken-down vehicle appeared, driving through the fire. Everyone watched, fearing it might explode at any moment. Everett, Delmar, and Peter stood watching too. The young boy, relative of Peter, arrived with the vehicle and told them to hurry and get in, saying he had come to rescue them. He saved all three of them. After driving a short distance, Peter asked the boy to stop and told him it was enough, asking him to leave. The boy replied that he didn't want to stay with his father and had come with them, warning that he might get caught if he went back. Peter told him it wouldn't work if he stayed and suggested he leave to avoid getting into trouble. They let the boy go, along with a small dog that was with him. After that, the boy left, and the three of them escaped into the forest safely. After escaping, they felt very hungry after some time. So they killed a lizard they found nearby, and the three of them cooked and ate it. During this time, Everett mentioned that it was June 17th, and in 4 more days, all the water in the dam would be released. Along with the water, the gold would also be lost, so they had to reach there before that happened. While discussing this, they saw a few people dressed in white clothes walking through the forest to a particular spot. These people went to a small pond, where they immersed themselves in water to cleanse their bodies. A father was conducting a ceremony, which they recognized as part of the Christian belief of washing away sins. Delmar, upon seeing this, felt the need to cleanse his sins as well. He went to the father and participated in the ritual. Afterward, he returned, feeling peaceful and saying he was no longer a sinner and could now live in peace. Everett, however, reminded him that legally they were still criminals, and telling the police about cleansing sins wouldn't help. Peter then said he would also go wash his sins, and invited Everett to join him. But Everett declined, saying he had applied gel on his hair, and it would be washed away in the water, so he didn't go. Later, the container of the gel that Everett had used fell into the hands of the police dogs. The dogs caught its scent, and along with the police, started tracking them. Peter and the others continued their journey in his family's vehicle. On their way, they came across an African-American man asking for a lift. They introduced themselves, and the man said his name was Tommy. Tommy was on his way to a radio station to perform music. The three of them joined Tommy on his way to the radio station, as Tommy offered them money. After running to the manager, they asked him if they would get paid for singing. The manager replied that they should first perform, and then he would decide if they would get the payment. So, the three of them, along with Tommy, went into the studio and started singing. Tommy played the guitar well, and the three performed impressively. The manager liked their performance and gave them some money. They hadn't expected to receive any payment, so they happily took the money and left the studio. At that moment, the town's mayor arrived. The mayor, who seemed to be lounging around, had come with his team. The reason was that the song the three had sung earlier had been broadcast live, and the mayor liked it. He came to the radio station to offer a reward. Everett, Delmar, and Peter, unaware of this, walked away happily with the money. Later that night, they gathered around a small fire and discussed their future plans. They dreamed of dividing the gold they had and making a good fortune out of it. While they were talking, they heard the sound of dogs barking. They realized that the police had arrived. However, the police hadn't found their exact location yet, because the three had hidden near an old house after parking their vehicle nearby. But eventually, the police discovered both the house and the vehicle and set the house on fire. Realizing they would be caught if they stayed, the three decided to flee through the forest without taking their vehicle. Now, they were trying to reach Everett's house without a car. As the three of them walked with difficulty, a speeding car came towards them, raising a cloud of dust. From the back of the car, money was flying out. Ignoring it, the driver continued to drive fast. The three of them saw the car and waved to stop it. Once the car stopped, Everett and Peter asked the driver for help, while Delmar noticed that the flying money was real US dollars. Meanwhile, 2 or 3 Jeeps were approaching from behind. Realizing they were police, the three quickly got into the car and asked the driver to speed up. The driver then mentioned a small problem. He asked them to tear off the flying bills from the bag. When they saw the police vehicles closing in from behind, Everett said, "The police are following us. Speed up." At that point, the driver handed the steering to Everett and grabbed a machine gun, firing at the police. It was then that the three understood the situation. The police weren't after them, but after the driver, who had robbed a bank. Delmar, scared, started crying and begged, "Let us go, we'll get out." However, the driver continued firing. At that moment, some cows ran across the road, scared by the sound of gunfire. They blocked the police vehicles, giving the three a chance to escape. 3 people managed to escape during a brief moment of opportunity. Soon after, another person joined their team, a notorious thief named George. George had a big dream: to become the world's greatest thief. He wasn't afraid of the police and even boldly entered a bank with a gun, robbing it by firing 4 shots to take all the money. After the robbery, they quickly fled into the forest in their vehicle. At the moment, they had set up a small camp somewhere in the forest. George shared his ambitions and plans with them. He told them he wanted to rob more banks and kill a few police officers along the way, aiming to become a feared criminal. Even if the police eventually caught and executed him, George said he would be happy as long as he became famous. He also shared some of his stolen money with the three. Afterward, the three, Everett, Delmar, and Peter, continued their journey toward Everett's house. Along the way, they entered a few houses to ask for food. In one house, they found a cake, took it, and left money behind before heading off, unnoticed by anyone. While traveling further, they saw a vehicle that frightened them. Thinking it was the police, they became anxious. However, it turned out to be just a regular transport vehicle, moving prisoners to another location. Relieved, the three continued their journey. Part of their plan involved a special hair gel that Everett liked to use. They entered a shop to buy it, unaware that the scent of the gel would help the police and tracking dogs find them later. After buying the gel, they came out of the shop just as another customer arrived and parked their car. Seeing an opportunity, the three quickly jumped into the car and drove away, escaping once again. The 3 men managed to escape once again, while prison guards and police officers were chasing them closely. In the meantime, the police discovered some information that 3 of them have visited a radio station. They performed something there, and it quickly became popular in the area. Hearing about this, the police went to the station's owner and asked if he had any information, like their address or other details. The radio owner replied, saying, "I don't know anything. They just showed up one day, said they could sing, so I gave them a chance. That's all I know." Meanwhile, the 3 men continued their journey in the car they had. On the way, they heard a sweet sound of music coming from the forest. Delmar asked them to stop the car, saying, "Hey, stop the car. This music is amazing." They stopped the car and followed the sound. There, they saw 3 half-dressed girls sitting by a river, singing while bathing. The men, mesmerized by the music, walked toward the girls. The girls danced around them, giving them something to drink. The 3 of them enjoyed the music, the dancing, and the drinks. After some time, all 3 lost consciousness. When Everett and Delmar regained consciousness, they looked around and realized Peter, who was with them, had disappeared. Only Peter's clothes were left behind. Delmar, filled with fear and conviction, claimed that the mysterious figures they had seen earlier were sorcerers. He insisted they had enchanted the group and brought them to this place. He also believed that the sorcerers had harmed Peter and possibly made him disappear. Everett was skeptical and dismissed these claims. However, Delmar pointed out that only Peter's clothes were left behind. He suspected something strange was inside the shirt, perhaps Peter's heart. To clear their doubts, they examined the shirt, only to find a frog emerging from it. Realizing there was no heart or anything else, Everett was relieved, but Delmar stubbornly believed the sorcerers had turned Peter into a frog and vowed to save him. Determined, Delmar leaped into a nearby pond and caught the frog. He placed it in a box, declaring it was their friend Peter and that they must not abandon him. Everett, still puzzled, reluctantly went along with Delmar. Hungry and exhausted, the two entered a nearby hotel. Using the money George had given them, they ordered food. Their behavior caught the attention of another customer, who mistook them for wealthy individuals. The man approached them with a business proposition. He claimed he had ways to double their money and invited them to join him. Naively, Everett and Delmar agreed and followed him to a spot under a tree. While they ate and listened to his ideas, the man suddenly broke a branch and struck Delmar on the head. As Delmar collapsed, Everett, confused, asked if this was part of the business. The man sarcastically confirmed before hitting Everett too. With both of them nearly unconscious, the man stole all their money. It became clear he was a con man who had lured them with deceitful intentions to rob them. The group had a box with them. When the thief opened the cardboard box in Delmar's possession, he was surprised to find a frog inside. Frustrated, he thought, "A frog? All my effort was wasted." Meanwhile, Delmar, who was too weak to stand after being beaten, begged the thief not to harm the frog, explaining that it was his friend. The thief, irritated and mocking Delmar, responded that he would fix the problem. He grabbed the frog and with a single squeeze killed it. Delmar was devastated and began crying, exclaiming that his friend Peter was now dead. At the same time, we see Peter tied to a tree by the police, who were interrogating him. Peter, under duress, confessed everything. He revealed that they had escaped from jail to retrieve gold buried outside Everett's house. Later, in the next scene, Everett and Delmar got a lift in a farmer's bullock cart. On the way, they noticed some escaped prisoners working along the roadside. Among them, Everett saw someone who bore a striking resemblance to Peter. Everett asked Delmar if Peter had any brothers. Confused, Delmar replied that he had never heard of any. Everett then suggested that Peter's father might have had some setup or secret. Despite all this, the two clueless friends failed to realize that the man they saw was actually Peter himself. After getting a lift in the farmer's bullock cart, they reached the city area. In some parts of the city, major events were taking place as the elections were approaching. One of the candidates climbed onto the stage and gave a speech filled with racism and discrimination. He claimed that if people voted for him, not a single person of a particular race would remain in the area, and he promised to drive them all out. A few spectators clapped in agreement with his divisive words. After the speech, 3 young girls were brought onto the stage to sing songs. Everett, who had arrived at the event, saw the girls and recognized them with great joy as his daughters. He ran toward them, shouting, "My children, your father is here!" The girls, however, were confused and asked him, "Father, aren't you supposed to be dead?" Everett was taken aback and asked, "Who told you that?" The girls replied, "Mother told us that you died in an accident." Everett took the girls with him and went straight to his wife. He noticed that she was holding a small trophy, and he wondered how it was possible because when he left, she hadn't been pregnant. When he reached her, he saw another man standing beside her. Things became clear to Everett. His wife told him, "You are a liar. I don't want to live with you anymore. This man is my new partner, and we're getting married soon." She asked him to leave the place politely. Angered, Everett tried to confront the man, but soon realized that the man was skilled in martial arts and had a black belt in karate. None of Everett's blows could land, and he received a solid beating in return. Finally, the people around gathered and threw Everett out of the shop where the confrontation had occurred. Delmar found Everett unconscious and took him away with a gun. To lift Everett's spirits, Delmar took him to a theater. While they were watching a movie, someone unexpectedly opened the main door. This interruption irritated both Everett and Delmar. They looked towards the door and saw a few police officers quietly standing there. However, the police were not there for Everett or Delmar. They had brought some prisoners to watch the movie, and among them was Peter. Despite the dim light, Peter recognized Everett and Delmar. He warned Everett not to return home because a trap had been set for him. Peter revealed that he had already exposed everything about Everett to someone. Hearing this, Delmar and Everett were confused. They moved closer to confirm it was Peter. Delmar asked Peter if he hadn't turned into a frog and died, to which Peter, annoyed, denied such absurd claims. After the movie ended, they prepared to leave but didn't want to leave Peter behind. The prisoners were temporarily housed in a specific place. Everett, Delmar, arrived there. They managed to free Peter by cutting his chains and other bindings. The three of them then left the location together. While they were walking, Delmar told Peter that he had thought Peter had turned into a frog and died. Peter, surprised, asked Delmar why he was talking nonsense. He explained that the girls who danced with them earlier had handed him over to the police. Peter added that he had been beaten up and, under pressure, confessed everything. He suggested they quickly take the gold and other valuables before the police arrived. Peter hoped they could share the loot and live a carefree life. Hearing this, Delmar and Peter hugged each other happily. Meanwhile, Everett, lying down nearby, started teasing them. He admitted that he had lied earlier. Peter brushed it off, saying a small lie didn't matter. However, Everett revealed that his lie wasn't minor. He confessed that he hadn't escaped from prison to find gold. Instead, he had learned that his wife was planning to remarry, and he had broken out to stop her. When Delmar and Peter heard this, they were furious. They had been planning to get out of prison within a month, but Everett had dragged them into this trap. They thought his actions were outrageous, and their anger was uncontrollable. Delmar and Peter grabbed Everett and started shaking him violently, hitting him back and forth. Amid the commotion, all three of them tumbled down and fell to the ground. At that moment, a bright and intense light appeared in front of them. The three men stood up and looked toward the light. What they saw shocked them. It was something they had never expected. They found themselves facing a strange cult group. The group had set up large crosses, some of them burning. At the front stood a person dressed in red robes. But what surprised and frightened them the most was something else. Among the cult members was a musician named Tommy, who had given them a ride 2 days earlier. To their horror, Tommy was now part of the group and was about to sacrifice them. Determined to act, Everett, Delmar, and Peter fought back. They managed to overpower 3 members of the group, dragged them into the woods, and took their clothes to disguise themselves. They then decided to confront Tommy. When they caught Tommy, they questioned him angrily, asking why the cult was trying to kill him and what had gone wrong. At that moment, Tommy explained that the group intended to sacrifice him to win an election. While Tommy was talking, another person standing behind overheard their conversation. That person turned out to be the thief who had knocked out Everett and Delmar earlier and stolen their money. Surprisingly, he was also part of the cult. Hearing Tommy's words, the thief grew suspicious and quickly pulled off Everett's and Delmar's hats, loudly declaring that outsiders had infiltrated their group. This caused the cult members to surround Everett, Delmar, and Tommy in an attempt to capture them. When they identified the cult leader, Everett and Delmar recognized him as a political figure they had seen the previous day, giving a speech about his vision of eliminating an entire racial group if he won the election. The leader had chosen Tommy, an African descent musician, as a sacrificial offering to fulfill their ritual. In the midst of the chaos, Everett managed to cut the ropes holding a large wooden cross. The cross toppled over, hitting the thief and a few other cult members, creating further confusion. Amid the uproar, Everett, Delmar, Peter, and Tommy seized the opportunity to escape. They ran straight to the city and arrived at an opera house where the mayor was holding an event with a crowd gathering. Everett came up with an idea and asked Delmar and Peter to trust him one last time. Although reluctant because of Everett's earlier tricks, they agreed. The group disguised themselves with fake beards and wigs before stepping onto the stage. They performed a song they had previously sung on the radio, with Tommy playing the guitar beautifully. The audience was astonished and delighted, recognizing the performance from the radio and celebrating it with great enthusiasm. At that moment, Everett took his beard slightly and looked at his wife, revealing his identity to her. Seeing this, she was shocked to realize it was him. The mayor was also present in the audience. The music program was well received and greatly enjoyed by everyone. Meanwhile, the leader of a nearby cult group, who was a politician, arrived at the venue. Recognizing that Everett and his team were performing on stage, he raised his voice and accused them of disrupting his plans. He declared that they were trying to ruin his event and stated that if he won the election, there would be no place for Black people in the country. He urged the crowd to support him and to take action against Everett and his team. However, the people, who respected music and talent, chose not to support the politician. They continued to enjoy the performance wholeheartedly and showed no interest in his divisive remarks. After the program, the mayor stepped onto the stage and announced that there would no longer be any charges against Everett and his team. He commended their music as exceptional and declared their freedom. He assured them they could now move freely without fear. With the mayor's decision, Everett and his team gained their freedom and left the venue happily, along with the crowd. After the program ended, Everett went to meet his wife. He told her that he had signed an agreement with the mayor and assured her that, just like the new man she was planning to marry, he too would earn well. He requested her to come back to him. Everett asked her again if she would reconsider and join him. His wife replied that she might think about it, but only if he brought back her first engagement ring, which was kept in their old house. Everett agreed and promised to retrieve it the next day. Meanwhile, a group of people carrying torches passed through the street. At the front of the group was a captured criminal. They dragged him away, tied him to a chair, and prepared to execute him with an electric shock. Despite the horrifying punishment awaiting him, the criminal stood there laughing and smiling. When Everett, Delmar, and Peter saw this, they were shocked. Upon closer look, they realized the man was George, who had become infamous as a notorious thief in the region. The next morning, Everett went to his old house to fetch the ring. However, there was an unexpected twist. A policeman, recently released from jail, was hiding there with his men. They captured Everett and his companions, intending to execute them immediately and bury them on the spot. Remaining calm, Everett declared that they had no authority to arrest him, as the mayor had already granted them freedom. His confidence in his words was unmistakable. The police officer mentioned that there was no one to record the events and assured that none of it would be known to the outside world. He stated that neither the mayor nor anyone at the police station would be informed. He expressed his frustration, saying he had been made to run like a dog for days and that this act was his personal revenge. He emphasized that this matter would remain completely secret. He then began preparing to hang the three individuals, leading them toward the noose. At that moment, Everett, who was not deeply religious, decided to pray as death seemed imminent. He knelt and prayed sincerely, asking God to forgive all his sins. While Everett was praying, he noticed water slowly seeping into the area where they stood. Surprised, he wondered where the water was coming from and speculated it might be a hidden spring. Soon, he heard a noise and saw water rushing toward them with immense force. The powerful flow of water swept away Everett's small house along with the officer and his men, carrying them all away in its path. After being caught in the flood, Everett, Delmar, and Peter managed to rise to the water's surface. A coffin, which had been prepared by the policemen to bury them, also floated up. Made of sturdy wood, it became their lifeline as they held on tightly to avoid sinking. Tommy, who was also swept away by the current, swam to the surface and found a wooden plank to cling to. Together, all four survived, while the policeman and his group were carried away by the rushing water. After escaping, Everett went straight to his wife. He asked her if she truly needed the engagement ring that had gone missing or if she would accept something else. She insisted on the same ring, saying it was the only thing she wanted, and asked him to bring it back. Determined to fulfill her request, Everett followed her with persistence. The story concluded on this note, bringing the movie to its end.